The most hunted warship in history never fired its guns at an enemy ship. Not once. Not a single enemy vessel sunk, not a single engagement won. And yet the British Royal Navy spent 3 years, launched more than 30 separate air and naval attacks, and diverted enormous resources just to destroy it. The Tirpitz never needed to fight anyone. It just needed to exist. I'm Jack, and today I want to tell you exactly what happened to the Tirpitz, where it ended up, and why the answer to that question is genuinely strange. Because unlike its sister ship, the Bismarck, which we covered previously and which went down in one dramatic engagement in the Atlantic, the Tirpitz met a completely different kind of end. It was hunted for years, survived things that should have killed it, and when it finally died, it died in shallow water. And what happened to it after that is the part most people have never heard. The Tirpitz was the second of 2 Bismarck-class battleships built for Nazi Germany. Commissioned in February 1941, it was actually 2,000 tons heavier than the Bismarck after wartime modifications, making it the heaviest battleship ever built by a European navy. 8 15-inch guns, armor plating 30 centimeters thick on the hull, a crew of over 2,600 men. It was built to dominate the North Atlantic, and Germany announced it with exactly the same word they had used for the Bismarck: unsinkable. It never made it to the Atlantic. Almost immediately after completing sea trials, the Tirpitz was sent north to Norway. The plan was not for it to fight. The plan was for it to sit there and be terrifying. Churchill himself called it the dominant factor in British naval strategy, and he was not exaggerating. The Tirpitz, moored in the Norwegian fjords, forced Britain to keep its most powerful warships in home waters at all times. Every convoy, every deployment, every strategic decision had to account for the possibility that the Tirpitz might move. The Germans had discovered something interesting. A ship that never fights can sometimes do more damage than one that does. The most extraordinary example of this happened in July 1942, and I keep coming back to it because of what it says about the power of just sitting still. A convoy called PQ-17 was making the run from Iceland to the Soviet port of Arkhangelsk, carrying tanks, aircraft, and ammunition. 35 merchant ships with a substantial Allied escort. On July 4th, British intelligence reported that the Tirpitz had sortied from its Norwegian fjord and was moving to intercept. The Admiralty panicked. The order went out immediately. Convoy is to scatter. The escort warships turned and ran west. The merchant ships broke apart in every direction and tried to make it to port alone. Here is the part that still makes me shake my head. The Tirpitz was still at anchor. It had not moved. It briefly left harbour the following day, was spotted by a British submarine, and was immediately recalled by a German command chain too cautious to risk it. The ship never got anywhere near the convoy. But the damage was already done. With no escort, the scattered merchant ships were picked off one by German aircraft and submarines. 24 of the 35 ships were sunk. 3,350 vehicles, 430 tanks, 210 aircraft, and over 99,000 tons of cargo went to the bottom of the Arctic. Winston Churchill called it one of the most melancholy naval episodes in the whole of the war. The Tirpitz caused that massacre without leaving harbour. The British understood they had to kill it, and so began one of the longest, most expensive, and most persistent naval hunts of the entire war. More than 30 attacks over nearly 3 years. It started with conventional bombing raids that repeatedly failed to penetrate the fjords. The Tirpitz was nestled under mountains, shrouded in smoke screens, protected by anti-torpedo nets and anti-aircraft guns. Standard bombing from standard altitude simply could not reach it. So, in September 1943, the Royal Navy tried something different. 6 midget submarines, called X-craft, were towed over 1,000 miles from Scotland to the Norwegian fjord where the Tirpitz lay moored. Each one was crewed by 4 men. Their mission was to slip under the anti-torpedo nets, crawl beneath the hull of the Tirpitz, and plant 2-ton explosive charges on the keel. Only 2 of the 6 actually made it close enough. X6 and X7 placed their charges under the ship, and both crews surrendered, knowing they could not escape. Their prisoners were aboard the Tirpitz when the charges detonated minutes later. The explosion lifted the Tirpitz bodily out of the water. Its engines were wrecked, its turrets thrown off their bearings, internal systems destroyed throughout the ship. The X-craft crews who placed those charges were awarded the Victoria Cross. The Tirpitz was put out of action for 6 months. But it was repaired, and the hunt continued. Between April and October 1944, the British carried out 6 more major bombing raids. Some caused significant damage, none finished it. The Tirpitz absorbed everything and kept being repaired. By this point, Germany was pouring resources into fixing a ship that had never actually been used as a warship, and the Allies were committing elite bomber squadrons to killing a ship that refused to die. The end came because of a bomb that was specifically designed for this problem. The Tallboy was a 12,000-pound deep penetration bomb developed by engineer Barnes Wallis, the same man behind the bouncing bomb used in the famous Dambusters raid. It was not meant to hit the surface of a ship. It was meant to fall from high altitude, reach near supersonic speed, punch through armour, and detonate deep inside the structure. On September 15, 1944, 38 Lancaster bombers of the Royal Air Force's 9 Squadron and 617 Squadron, the Dambusters, flew from a base in northern Russia to catch the Tirpitz at its moorings in Kerfjord. One Tallboy punched through the bow and detonated deep in the hull. The damage was catastrophic. The Tirpitz could no longer be made fully seaworthy. Germany made one more decision that would seal the ship's fate. Rather than scrap it, they towed the Tirpitz south to Håkøya Island near Tromsø and moored it there to serve as a static floating artillery battery. In the fjords of Kerfjord, it had been protected by mountains. At Håkøya, it was exposed. The move brought it within range of Lancaster bombers, flying directly from Scotland without needing to refuel in Russia. On November 12, 1944, 29 Lancasters from 9 and 617 squadrons flew from airfields in northern Scotland and arrived over Tromsø in clear weather, with no German fighter cover. The smoke screens the Germans tried to generate were late. 2 Tallboys struck the Tirpitz on the port side amidships. Near misses hammered the hull underwater. The ship listed immediately. A fire broke out on deck and spread to an ammunition magazine for one of the main gun turrets. The magazine exploded. Within minutes, the Tirpitz had rolled completely onto its side in the shallow waters of the fjord. Estimates of the dead range from 950 to over 1,200 men. The largest battleship ever built by a European navy was gone. Now here is where it gets strange. Unlike the Bismarck sitting 3 miles down in the Atlantic, the Tirpitz did not disappear. It sank in shallow water, less than 50 feet deep in places. The hull was clearly visible from shore. Rescue crews worked through the night, cutting holes in the exposed hull to reach men still alive in air pockets below. Norwegian civilians came out in boats to help. Several hundred men were pulled out alive through the hull. Others could be heard tapping, but could not be reached in time. After the war, the Norwegian government sold the wreck to a Norwegian salvage company for 120,000 kroner, which historians have noted was an extremely low price given what was still in it. A Norwegian-German consortium spent 9 years, from 1948 to 1957, breaking the Tirpitz apart in place. They worked in conditions that were brutal, cutting through 30-centimeter armor plate in sub-zero Arctic temperatures. Everything of value came off. The turbo generators were sold to a fish processing factory in the Norwegian town of Honningsvåg, where they powered the facility for years. The electrical cables alone fetched the equivalent of $10,000. The steel armor plates were sold to the Norwegian Roads Administration and used as temporary road pavement during construction projects across Norway. You can look that up. Steel from the hull of the most feared battleship in the world spent decades being driven over by Norwegian traffic. By 1957, almost everything was gone. What remained was registered as a protected site under Norwegian law and treated as a war grave for the hundreds of men still entombed in the sections that could not be accessed. Today, on Håkøya Island, there is a small memorial built from salvaged Tirpitz steel. Divers still visit the site. The bow section remains partially submerged. In 2025, a research team from the Remarco project conducted scientific sampling of the water, sediment, and marine life at the site, noting that residual pollutants from the wreck continue to slowly leach into the surrounding environment 80 years later. There is something about the Tirpitz that I find harder to get past than almost any other ship I have looked at. The Bismarck went out fighting. It sank HMS Hood. It ran from the Royal Navy. It took thousands of shells and refused to go down. The Tirpitz never did any of that. It hid in fjords for 3 years, never fired its main guns at an enemy warship, caused the worst convoy disaster of the war without leaving its anchorage, and survived attack after attack before finally being flipped onto its side by bombs dropped from aircraft it could not reach. Its guns were never the weapon, it was the weapon, and in the end, the most dangerous thing about the Tirpitz was that everyone was afraid of what it might do. It never had to do anything at all.